Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. My name is Cole Statham. I arrived on Mars research station Helios during what was supposed to be a routine security assignment. I had been recruited by a private security firm called Trident Oversight, a company known for sending personnel to remote facilities. They offered competitive pay, promised good equipment, and boasted extensive experience working alongside specialized research teams. In hindsight, the contract was too generous. At the time, I assumed the generous salary was a bonus for dealing with isolation. The truth behind it was something else entirely. I have decided to record everything I experienced in a single, unbroken account. If you have come across this record, consider this my formal briefing on what really happened at Station Helios and why we should never underestimate the unknown forces hidden beneath the Martian soil. When I first touched down on Mars, I remember stepping onto the landing pad and seeing the towering modules of Helios. The station was enormous, a central building with tall antenna arrays, multiple habitat rings, and an underground complex that was accessible via reinforced elevators. Red dust kicked up around the cargo shuttle, creating a haze that clung to every surface. From the outside, Helios gave the impression of progress and safety. We all had confidence in the station's advanced technology and robust protocols. I spent my early days settling into the security barracks, a utilitarian block of bunks arranged in close proximity to the armory. Each morning, I inspected the corridors, tested the oxygen regulators, and memorized the exit routes. The staff at Helios was diverse. Biologists, geologists, engineers, and administrative personnel each played a part in the station's goal: to investigate potential terraforming methods and study a newly discovered microbial life form. Everyone seemed to have a purposeful routine. My main contact was Captain Adrienne Phelps. She was a veteran of multiple off-world postings, known for being calm under pressure. Phelps walked me through the daily operations, introduced me to the senior researchers, and explained the station's layered security. Everything felt thoroughly professional, with no sign of the nightmare that would soon unfold. After roughly 2 weeks of routine duties, I started noticing irregularities in the station's closed-circuit feed. Certain cameras covering the lower sublevels began to glitch. At first, I saw only short bursts of static. I attributed these interruptions to standard transmission problems or minor hardware failures. Helios was full of advanced tech, but Mars's environment can be relentless, affecting any system not checked daily. One evening, I was in the security office reviewing shift logs. I heard a faint announcement from the overhead PA. It sounded like someone had interrupted the normal broadcast with a series of garbled words. An automated voice repeated, "Containment anomaly." Then there was a burst of static, followed by "Sub-level 3. After that, the line went silent. I checked the data logs, but no official alert had been recorded. When I investigated Sub-level 3 with an engineer named Marcus Donnelly, everything appeared normal. Storage crates were stacked neatly, and no sign of tampering could be found. The only unusual detail was a subtle, lingering odor that neither of us could identify. Marcus used a handheld sensor to scan for airborne contaminants, but didn't detect anything concerning. Still, it bothered me. The sense that something had changed in that space was inescapable, even if we couldn't find hard evidence. That same night, I had a conversation with Dr. Felicity Barnes, one of the lead researchers studying the microbial life. She seemed uneasy. Her remarks were guarded, but she hinted that experiments involving Martian microbes had escalated faster than expected. She suspected the lab staff was under pressure from corporate directors to expedite results. Dr. Barnes did not elaborate further, but her worried tone lingered in my mind. The real trouble began around day 16 of my posting. I was in the armory doing routine checks when an alarm blared across the station. The flashing indicator lights on the panels read, "Biohazard Protocol Alpha." This was the highest level warning for any biological threat. At the same time, the station's corridor lights switched to emergency mode. Captain Phelps' voice came through my helmet comm. "Cole, we have a situation in Lab Block A. Multiple staff members are requesting assistance. Prepare for immediate deployment." I grabbed my standard-issue sidearm and a pulse rifle from the weapons rack. Some of my security colleagues, including Nina Rook and Gregory Reese, rushed to join me in the corridor. As soon as we reached Lab Block A, we were met by a sealed door and flashing quarantine lights. The door's reinforced window revealed a small antechamber and the silhouettes of figures moving erratically inside the lab. After confirming the area was under quarantine, we used an override code to open the outer door. That gave us access to the antechamber, but the inner door remained sealed. Blood was smeared across the antechamber floor. We observed no sign of the wounded staff member who had left it there. We also heard banging from the other side of the inner door. Nina tried to open a private audio channel to the lab, but only static came through. Then the inner door's auto-lock hissed, and it slid open without warning. From within, several of our colleagues, individuals who should have been conscious and cooperating, were stumbling in a daze. Their protective suits looked damaged. They appeared to be in a state of confusion. At first, I thought they might be experiencing a severe chemical exposure. Then one of them looked at us with clouded eyes and rushed forward with more force than any dazed, infected person should have managed. I reacted quickly, ordering them to stand back. Gregory stepped in front and tried to contain the situation, urging them to cooperate, but they ignored him. One reached for Gregory, nearly knocking him off balance. This was the first moment I realized we were facing something unusual, something that did not align with standard lab accidents or known pathogens. We subdued two of them using non-lethal measures. The other individuals fled deeper into the lab. Captain Phelps arrived with reinforcements, and the corridor soon filled with personnel trying to assess the crisis. The entire block was put on full lockdown. Medics arrived to examine the individuals we had restrained. They wore protective gear and ran scans, but the results were inconclusive. Blood samples were abnormal, and the lab instruments showed an intense immune reaction in the subjects. The subdued staff members displayed unusual aggression. They made no coherent sounds. They attempted to get free from restraints and did not respond to verbal instructions or sedation. Worse, their injuries, bruises, cuts, even possible fractures, seemed to heal at an unnatural pace. Medics documented that the rate of recovery was far beyond human norms. Captain Phelps told me in a low voice, "Containment is now our top priority." The station's leadership convened an emergency meeting. Dr. Barnes was there, along with Dr. Vance Rollins, Chief of Research. Dr. Rollins looked drained, as if he hadn't slept in days. He confirmed that the lab team had been studying a newly discovered microbial entity found beneath the planet's surface near the polar regions. The microbe possessed regenerative properties that surpassed expectations. According to his findings, it seemed to bond with human tissue in a way that enhanced cellular repair. However, the process also induced neurological changes, overriding normal cognitive functions and amplifying aggressive behavior. Corporate sponsors had pushed the team to accelerate experiments, especially on living subjects, something that had been strictly off the record. Although unethical and in direct violation of standard safety protocols, they had tested the microbe in advanced tissue cultures. When that yielded promising data, some among the research staff used volunteer test subjects. Early results showed rapid healing, but also mental changes that worsened over time. The meeting concluded with an unsettling realization. Multiple individuals had become hosts to this microbial entity. Once the infection set in, it spread internally. If the occupant perished, the microbe reanimated the body as a functioning husk. We began calling those reanimated carriers the infected, though Dr. Barnes described them more bluntly. She called them zombies, referencing the abrupt transition from living researcher to mindless, violent being. Alarms continued to echo through the halls. Reports of attacks in the lower levels began appearing on the security feed. Lab staff who had fled the initial incident were now unaccounted for. Some had likely spread the contagion to unsuspecting colleagues. Captain Phelps didn't mince words. "We have an outbreak. Station Helios is compromised." With the existence of an outbreak confirmed, Phelps initiated a station-wide quarantine. This meant sealing access to every corridor in a hierarchical pattern. We started by locking down the labs, then systematically moved outward. The command deck broadcast instructions for all personnel to shelter in place until we could assess the severity of the situation. Station Helios was designed with multiple containment measures, so we believed we had a chance to stop the spread. Each module had blast doors that could hold under significant pressure, and the subterranean sections had reinforced corridors. Our plan? Confine infected individuals to certain zones and proceed with systematic sweeps to secure the rest of the station. However, the infection's rapid, regenerative nature led to outcomes we weren't prepared for. Some infected staff displayed extreme vigor despite injuries that would incapacitate any healthy person. I personally witnessed a security officer lose contact with the group when he tried to chase down an infected researcher. The officer returned minutes later, severely bitten on the arm. Despite immediate medical attention and disinfection, he began showing the same vacant stare and uncoordinated movements. In the time it took for us to place him on a stretcher and attempt sedation, he displayed violent resistance. Even more unsettling, his wound seemed to be knitting itself together at an alarming rate. This was consistent with the microbe's regenerative properties, now fully integrated into living tissue. That was the final confirmation. The infection was highly contagious through direct contact. Despite the quarantine, multiple containment breaches occurred, which forced us to send security teams deeper into the facility. Sub-levels 1 and 2 contained storage and maintenance. Sub-level 3 housed advanced labs. Sub-level 4 and beyond were restricted to specialized research. According to the station's data logs, an entire group of infected staff had moved downward in an attempt to circumvent locked doors. Their knowledge of Helios allowed them to bypass certain passages that an outside intruder would never find. A small squad, myself, Nina Rook, Marcus Donnelly, the engineer, and 2 other security officers named Victor Huang and Sarah Delgado, boarded one of the freight elevators to reach sub-level 3. We planned to reinforce the sealed labs, re-establish control of the main corridor, and rescue any uninfected survivors. We checked our rifles and oxygen masks, hoping the infection wasn't airborne. Our information suggested it required direct physical transfer, but none of us wanted to take chances. As the elevator descended, an unnerving silence gripped the compartment. Nina quietly read from a handheld device that displayed the station schematics. She pointed to a cluster of labs labeled Cellular Regeneration Wing, a place we hadn't been allowed to see during normal operations. Marcus mentioned that the wing was rumored to be where Dr. Rollins ran hush-hush experiments. We realized it was likely ground zero for the outbreak. Upon reaching sub-level 3, we entered a broad corridor lined with glass observation windows. These windows looked into darkened labs where the overhead lights were either flickering or completely out. Our footsteps echoed on the metal floor. We found scattered equipment, overturned tables, broken flasks, scorched sample crates, no sign of immediate life, infected or otherwise. At the far end of the corridor, we discovered a security checkpoint that appeared to be barricaded from the inside. After announcing ourselves and receiving no answer, we checked the door's integrity. Inside, we discovered 3 staff members who had lost consciousness from lack of oxygen. The ventilation system in that area had failed, likely damaged during a struggle. We administered portable oxygen from our gear, and they slowly regained awareness. They were uninfected, but extremely shaken. They told us the infected had already moved on toward the deeper labs, as if drawn by an instinct or a directive. We guided the survivors back to the elevator, instructing them to head upstairs and find medical personnel with protective gear. Our group then advanced further, aiming to reach the specialized research labs that had triggered our deepest concern. The corridor leading to the specialized labs was dimly lit by emergency lamps. The main power grid in that sector seemed partially disabled. We used mounted flashlights to navigate. The door to the main lab was pried open. Someone had used a crowbar or a similar tool to force entry. The control panel next to the door had been smashed. Inside, rows of large containment capsules were arranged in symmetrical lines. Each capsule was meant to hold biological samples in a controlled environment. Half of them were cracked or broken, apparently from the inside out. The leftover fluid on the floor had a thick, translucent quality. Computers flickered, showing half-finished diagnostic reports. Data scrolled across the screens, referencing advanced regeneration timelines, neural mapping, and something labeled Phase 4 trials. As we examined these capsules, Marcus connected to a functioning console. He managed to retrieve partial data logs. The logs contained a disturbing series of entries. Entry 1. Microbial integration successful in preliminary tissue. Regeneration at 3x expected speed. Entry 2. Test subject responding to gene therapy. Aggression noted. Possible risk factors under review. Entry 3. Subject overcame sedation. Vital signs remain high despite lethal injuries. Additional staff required to monitor behavior. Entry 4. Containment unit breach. Subject no longer accounted for. Searching. Quarantine recommended. Beyond these written reports, there were security camera clips showing volunteers who were first administered the microbe. They displayed remarkable healing capabilities. Minor cuts closed in seconds. Broken bones reset themselves within minutes. Then the logs documented personality changes, outbursts, unpredictable mood shifts, and violent impulses. The final entries were abrupt, with no further explanation. It was evident that the lab staff had turned to increasingly dangerous experiments under corporate pressure. The infected individuals were living examples of the microbe's catastrophic potential. Once the microbe took full hold, bodily damage no longer stopped the host. Even a fatal wound would only slow them down temporarily. We proceeded carefully through the specialized labs, moving between shattered equipment stations. Caution was our only advantage. Although we expected a confrontation, we were still caught off guard when a figure emerged from behind a broken containment capsule. The individual wore tattered Helios research attire. Their pale eyes and slack expression identified them as infected. Victor called out, requesting they remain still, but the person rushed forward, ignoring warnings. We tried to subdue them with non-lethal rounds. They went down but started to move again in short order. This was our first direct confirmation that standard methods were failing. The speed at which they recovered was astonishing. Nina, with calm determination, fired a well-placed shot that incapacitated the infected researcher for a longer period. Before we could regroup, several more infected individuals appeared. They lunged at us with unrestrained aggression. Our group managed a defensive formation, using the scattered lab tables for partial cover. The confrontation spiraled into a frantic attempt to repel attackers that recovered from wounds in real time. Our greatest advantage was that the microbe's regenerative properties needed time. After a sufficiently strong impact, the infected hosts stayed down for a brief interval. However, they did not remain that way indefinitely. We had to move quickly. Marcus used a handheld welder to seal the lab's side entrance, attempting to prevent additional infected from joining the fight. Sarah Delgado and Nina Rook directed covering fire. We counted 8 infected total, none of them showing signs of retreat. Eventually, we subdued them all through coordinated shots and improvised tactics, but the cost was high. Victor Huang took a deep bite to the shoulder. Marcus sustained lacerations from a grasp that tore through part of his suit. We quickly disinfected their wounds. Despite those efforts, we were unsure if the microbe had already transferred. After resecuring the labs, we hurried to find emergency medical supplies to treat Victor and Marcus. Behind a locked door with a biometric scanner, we discovered what appeared to be a central research area. Password-protected computers and large data servers lined the walls. Most of the staff who worked here were gone, either evacuated or infected. We rummaged through storage shelves until we found advanced antiviral compounds and specialized injection devices. One container was labeled Experimental Inhibitor. The label included a warning: unauthorized use prohibited, side effects unknown. With no better option, we administered the inhibitor to both Victor and Marcus, hoping it might slow or block the microbe's integration. Victor's condition stabilized somewhat. Marcus, on the other hand, began trembling, with occasional loss of balance. He asked us to keep moving forward, insisting that if we didn't restore the station's environment controls and secure the remaining modules, the outbreak would spread beyond Helios itself. While Sarah tended to Marcus, Nina and I accessed the research computers. We searched for any file that could help us understand how to stop this infection. Buried in encrypted directories were references to a vaccine prototype and an antigen therapy regimen. The notes indicated that this prototype had never been tested on humans. The files also mentioned that if the microbe was starved of certain nutrients, it would become dormant. However, these details were incomplete. We needed a full chemical profile to produce something that could effectively combat the infection. We decided it was time to regroup with Captain Phelps. Communication through the standard comm channels was difficult. Interference seemed to be growing. We relied on short-range signals that only worked within the station. We managed to connect with the command deck. An exhausted voice came through. "Captain Phelps here. Where have you been? We have serious problems on multiple levels." Phelps explained that the infection had spread to other sections of Helios. Infected staff were roaming corridors, and multiple firefights had taken place. Large portions of the crew were missing or trapped. Phelps was organizing a fallback plan to gather all uninfected personnel in the upper habitat modules, hoping to seal them off completely. We received new orders. Help secure an elevator shaft near the specialized labs, then head topside. However, we were concerned about the possibility of letting infected hosts slip through in the chaos. We also wondered how many people might still be alive and hiding, unaware of the scale of this catastrophe. Marcus was unable to stand without support, so Sarah supported him as we moved. Victor insisted he could still fight, although we could see he was pale and weakened. Our entire group was apprehensive about the uncertain transformations that might be taking place in their bodies. We backtracked toward the main corridor. On the way, we encountered more signs of struggle. Walls scraped by fingernails, scattered personal belongings, half-eaten ration packs left behind in desperation. We carefully avoided direct confrontation, keeping quiet whenever we heard movement in the distance. The station's previously vibrant hum of activity had changed to a strange hush, interrupted by occasional clanging or distant moans from infected staff. When we reached the designated elevator, we found it inactive. The power systems were disrupted. Marcus mustered enough focus to connect a portable battery to the elevator's control panel, providing a brief charge. While we waited for the doors to respond, the corridor lights dimmed further, as if the station were draining the last of its reserves. Finally, the elevator panel lit up. We stepped inside, carefully propping Marcus against the side. Nina pressed the button for the upper habitat modules. The doors closed. The elevator ride felt endless. We moved at half speed because the station's power grid was only partially online. Each level we passed had a flickering indicator on the control panel. Sub-level 2, sub-level 1. Then we entered the core section that connected to the main deck. Without warning, the elevator jolted and stopped. Emergency lights blinked. The overhead display read, "Mechanical error. Manual override required." We were caught between floors, suspended in partial darkness. Victor stepped forward, forcing the doors open using the manual release lever. We found ourselves about 5 feet below the next floor's access. With some effort, we crawled out. Sarah pulled Marcus up, though he was fading. The corridor we entered was barely lit, the overhead lamps in emergency mode. We recognized it as one of the main residential wings, an area with dormitories for station personnel. From further down the hallway, we heard a metallic scraping noise, followed by slow, uneven footsteps. Our nerves were already stretched thin. This new threat demanded immediate attention. Using hand signals, Nina and I took the lead, moving down the corridor to investigate while Sarah guarded Marcus and Victor. Upon rounding a corner, we came face to face with a cluster of 4 infected staff, each wearing a mix of casual attire and partial protective gear. They showed the same pale eyes and unsteady gait, but we knew better than to underestimate them. We tried to avoid direct conflict, but they noticed our movement and advanced. We established a narrow firing zone in the corridor. Shots from our rifles connected, halting 3 of them. The 4th seemed more resilient. Nina and I both fired, temporarily bringing it down. However, we knew from experience it wouldn't remain immobile for long. We took the opportunity to push forward, rejoin the rest of our group, and continue toward the upper modules. Eventually, we reached the main deck leading to the habitat modules. The entire area had been turned into a de facto stronghold by the remaining security teams. Captain Phelps spotted us and signaled us to hurry. 2 security officers opened the blast doors just enough for us to slip through. Beyond the doors, a makeshift barricade of crates and metal panels had been erected. A few uninfected medical staff were tending to wounded personnel. The sight was grim: injured colleagues, ration shortages, and a general sense of desperation. Captain Phelps approached, relief evident. "I'm glad you made it. We're consolidating resources here. Most of the crew that's still unaffected is gathered in these modules. Our biggest priority now is to keep them safe, but we're running out of time. We're not fully sealed off from the infected, and the power grid is failing." We told Phelps about the specialized labs, the data we found, and the potential for an inhibitor or vaccine. She was aware of rumors regarding advanced medical experiments, but hearing direct confirmation seemed to weigh heavily on her. She mentioned that Dr. Barnes was in another habitat ring, organizing a plan to retake certain vital stations, the command center, the generator room, and the communication uplink. For the moment, the infected outside were held at bay by the barricades. We all knew that would not last forever. The group was preparing fallback measures that included venting sections of the station to Martian atmosphere if the barricades broke. This was a last resort plan that risked killing uninfected survivors trapped in those areas. Marcus lay on a stretcher, drifting in and out of consciousness. Victor's face was ashen, but he assured us he felt stable. The medical staff tried to isolate them, worried about potential infection. We handed over the dose of experimental inhibitor we had found. The medics immediately administered a second injection to both men, hoping to slow any progression. We could only wait to see if it worked. Captain Phelps asked me and Nina to join a final push to the command center, which controlled the station's primary systems, including power distribution and environmental regulation. Dr. Barnes was likely to be there or on her way, trying to restore essential services. If the power grid was stabilized, we stood a chance of containing the outbreak long enough to craft a permanent solution. We gathered a small squad of volunteers: myself, Nina, a security specialist named Tyrese Rainey, and an engineer named Kaori Mori. With gear recharged, we navigated a series of sealed doors, each of which required manual overrides or passcode entries. The route was eerily quiet, dotted with signs of conflict: bullet casings, scorched markings where someone had used energy weapons, and the occasional movement in the shadows. We stayed vigilant. At the entrance to the command center, we found signs of forced entry, spidery cracks on the reinforced glass. Inside, monitors flickered, showing partial surveillance feeds of Helios. One screen revealed the main corridor with multiple infected wandering aimlessly. Another displayed a top-down blueprint of station modules, many lit in red, signaling compromised areas. Near a large central console stood Dr. Barnes and a handful of technical staff. She wore a torn lab coat, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. A bruise under one eye indicated recent confrontation. Despite her appearance, she was focused on the tasks at hand. She acknowledged our arrival with a nod and explained her objective: bypass the station's failing power grid by activating an emergency reactor. If successful, she could restore partial functionality to Helios's environmental controls. This step was essential to keep oxygen circulating properly and seal bulkheads to confine infected areas. The emergency reactor was located in a maintenance area on the far side of the command center. Activating it required manual input from 2 separate terminals, nearly 50 yards apart, to prevent unauthorized activation or sabotage. Dr. Barnes asked me and Tyrese to handle one terminal, while Nina and Kaori operated the other. She would coordinate from the main console, timing our inputs precisely. We spread out accordingly, each pair making its way through winding corridors filled with debris. The lights remained unreliable, so we relied on flashlights to see. Occasionally we glanced at monitors or control panels to ensure we were on track. Tyrese and I entered a small chamber labeled Reactor Terminal 1. We scanned the room for threats, found it empty, and approached a console covered in warning labels. Simultaneously, Nina and Kaori prepared Terminal 2. Dr. Barnes's voice came through on the intercom. Initiating reactor boot sequence in 3, 2, 1, engage. I entered the command code. Tyrese flipped a series of heavy switches. A loud hum shook the chamber. On the other side, Nina and Kaori performed similar actions. The hum intensified, and the reactor's status lights began shifting from red to amber. We waited for final confirmation. Suddenly, the room's door slammed shut behind us, accompanied by the hiss of an automated lock. From the corner of the chamber, a side door we hadn't noticed burst open. An infected staff member lunged through. Tyrese acted quickly, using a stun baton to drive the figure back. I tried to assist but realized 2 more infected were pushing in behind the first. We had to hold them off in close quarters. Our rifles were slung behind our backs, so Tyrese and I fought using sidearms and batons. It took every bit of skill to keep them at bay in such tight confines. We managed to immobilize them, but the door remained locked. Meanwhile, the reactor's hum grew louder. On the intercom, Dr. Barnes announced, "Power distribution is stabilizing, but I need the final confirmation at Terminal 2. Nina, Kaori, what's your status?" There was a brief crackle, then Kaori's voice came through. "We're pinned down, multiple infected. We need a moment." Tyrese pried at the locked door while I checked the override panel. With the main system reinitializing, the local controls were in lockdown mode. If we couldn't open the door manually, we risked being trapped if more infected arrived. After a tense minute, Tyrese managed to force the door open just enough for us to slip out. Outside, we found Nina and Kaori near their terminal, fending off a similar wave of infected. We added our firepower, managing to clear the immediate threat. Nina hit the final confirmation button. A surge of energy pulsed through the station's systems, flickering the lights overhead. The reactor was now active. Once the emergency reactor stabilized, the command center's monitors lit up with updated data. Dr. Barnes directed us back to the main console area. For the first time in many hours, the station had partial power, which enabled security features such as sealed bulkheads, climate controls, and advanced scanning. We watched in real time as Dr. Barnes initiated door locks across certain modules, trapping clusters of infected. Reinforced barriers were deployed in the corridors, directing the infected away from the habitat modules. This gave Captain Phelps and her team a chance to breathe. The station's environmental composition was now under direct control, meaning Dr. Barnes had the option to reduce oxygen or alter pressure in compromised areas, a grim tactic but potentially necessary. In the aftermath, the command center echoed with a new tension, a mix of hope that we might contain the outbreak and worry about what would happen to those still trapped. We also faced the looming question: how could we cure the infection? Even with containment, the microbe was still active within any infected individual, feeding off living tissue. Victor and Marcus came to mind, especially since they had received the experimental inhibitor. We relayed their status to Dr. Barnes, who expressed cautious optimism. If the inhibitor was slowing the microbe, further research might lead to a genuine cure. The corporate sponsors of Station Helios were suspiciously quiet throughout the crisis. Dr. Barnes mentioned that attempts to contact them were either ignored or met with unhelpful automated responses. It seemed that the corporate backers had distanced themselves, possibly deeming Helios a lost cause. Captain Phelps was furious. She had risked her career on promises that Helios was a legitimate operation, only to discover that corporate leaders had authorized experiments with near total disregard for safety. Nevertheless, We had immediate priorities: saving survivors and preventing the infection from spreading to any inbound supply ships or other Martian outposts. Some staff proposed a daring measure, luring as many infected as possible into certain sublevels, then depressurizing those sections. This could potentially stop them by exposing them to the thin Martian atmosphere. The idea might have worked, but there were moral implications. We couldn't be sure if any uninfected crew was still hiding in those corridors. Also, it would do nothing for the infected's regenerative properties if they somehow endured the atmospheric drop. Dr. Barnes pleaded for more time to develop a proper cure. She argued that some infected might be revived to a stable state if we discovered the right treatment. Captain Phelps wavered, uncertain if we had that luxury. While discussing options, we received a sudden signal from an outside frequency. It was an automated supply shuttle approaching Mars, scheduled to dock at Helios in less than 12 hours. The shuttle's pilot had no knowledge of the infection. If it landed, the infection could spread beyond Helios. We needed to send a warning or find a way to prevent docking. With the reactor online, Dr. Barnes adjusted the communication uplink. She transmitted a high-priority message. Emergency alert, do not approach. Martian research station Helios under quarantine. Zombie outbreak detected. The message repeated on a loop. Whether the supply shuttle would pick it up and heed the warning was uncertain. Time was running short. The infected remained active in various parts of the station. Some tried to break through sealed doors, using their enhanced strength to tear at barriers. Captain Phelps decided the only viable approach was to attempt a final purge of infected from critical areas, while Dr. Barnes and her team made one last push to finalize a prototype cure. A large group of security personnel gathered near the main corridor leading to the specialized labs. I joined them, standing beside Nina and Tyrese. Our plan involved splitting into 2 teams. Team 1 would draw the infected out of the labs and into the corridor. Team 2 would flank them from behind, neutralizing them en masse. This would buy Dr. Barnes enough time to gather crucial data and test the cure on a single infected subject. We steeled ourselves. This was effectively a last stand. If it succeeded, the station might be saved. If it failed, we would be overrun, and Helios would be lost for good. When the doors separating the labs from the corridor opened, infected individuals flooded through. Their eyes were glazed, their motions erratic, yet they had a collective intention: to reach us. Team 1 held ground, unleashing precise weapon fire. The infected fell but began to rise again with uncanny speed. Some were missing protective suits, yet they moved unfazed by injuries. Team 2 hit them from behind, focusing on the largest group. This coordinated assault proved more effective than our previous scattered skirmishes. However, the horde seemed endless. Whenever one group of infected was brought down, another wave appeared. The corridor descended into chaos. We had to act swiftly to ensure none slipped past and threatened the habitat modules. Amid the turmoil, I glimpsed Dr. Barnes and a few medics seizing one of the fallen infected and dragging it into the lab for immediate study. Risky as it was, that moment might be the key to halting the infection. After a grueling conflict, we managed to subdue or seal off the majority of the infected in the corridor. Some stragglers still roamed the deeper labs, but they posed less threat now that the main group was contained. The battle had cost us dearly. Several security officers were wounded, and it was uncertain if they were infected. We pulled back to the specialized labs where Dr. Barnes was analyzing the captive infected subject. Using a refined version of the inhibitor, she targeted the microbe's regenerative pathways. After a few tense minutes, we saw a glimmer of success. The subject's rapid healing diminished, and their skin tone shifted towards something less pallid. They remained unconscious, but the destructive aggression seemed to subside. Dr. Barnes turned to us, eyes wide with cautious optimism. This formula might work, but we need to administer it quickly to anyone at risk. Word spread among the surviving crew that a potential cure existed. A small medical team, supported by Captain Phelps, organized distribution stations. Anyone with a bite, scratch, or other exposure was given the injection. Those in advanced stages were sedated and injected under close observation. The process stretched through countless hours, with no guarantee of success. Marcus Donnelly, who had looked close to turning, responded well to the cure. He slowly regained clarity, though he was weak from the ordeal. Victor Huang also stabilized. For everyone who showed improvement, there was another whose condition was too far gone. Not all could be saved, which weighed heavily on Dr. Barnes. Still, the partial success was a beacon of hope. With the infection no longer spreading rampantly, we began clearing Helios module by module. The plan was to locate any infected pockets, administer the cure if possible, or secure them until they could be treated. Despite heartbreak over colleagues we had lost, we pressed on. Days passed as we reclaimed parts of the station. The supply shuttle never docked, having received our quarantine message. We had minimal contact with the outside world, possibly due to corporate interference or the inherent delay in Mars-to-Earth communications. The leadership at Helios turned their focus inward, repairing damage, caring for survivors, and refining the cure. We uncovered more evidence in the data servers showing that corporate directives had knowingly escalated the research, ignoring repeated warnings from Dr. Barnes and others. There was even a hidden file suggesting that the microbe was being examined for potential military applications, not merely healing or terraforming. This betrayal fueled a sense of resolve among the survivors. They intended to hold those responsible to account once normal communication was restored. After enough time, the station stabilized. Dr. Barnes declared the cure effective in most early-stage infections. Terminal cases still existed, but their numbers were few and they were contained. We arranged an internal triage system for the wounded. Critical sections of Helios were patched up, though the facility was far from fully operational. Captain Phelps ordered an evacuation plan for those in need of advanced care. A rescue vessel, rerouted from another Martian post, eventually arrived. It docked carefully, verifying the outbreak was under control. Survivors requiring urgent treatment were shuttled off Helios. Meanwhile, a core group remained to manage repairs, gather data, and safeguard the station from any resurgence of infection. Now, as I stand in one of Helios's battered corridors, I realize how close we came to losing everything. The infection's regenerative capabilities were far beyond what any of us expected. We nearly paid the ultimate price for that oversight. Yet thanks to a determined team and the sacrifice of many, Helios did not completely fall. I don't know how history will judge the events that took place here. Some may call it an unfortunate accident, others a reckless experiment gone wrong. From my perspective, it was a grim lesson in the dangers of pushing boundaries without considering the consequences. The word zombie still feels strange to use in a clinical setting, but there is no more fitting description for those reanimated hosts. If you are listening to or reading these words, remember the name Helios and all it stands for. Remember the researchers who tried to do good but were swayed by corporate demands. Remember the security teams and medical staff who fought to protect lives. Above all, remember that the thirst for discovery can lead us into dark places if we abandon prudence. This is Cole Statham, Security Officer for Mars Research Station Helios, filing my final report on the zombie outbreak that nearly doomed us all. We have survived and we carry on, hoping that the knowledge gained here will prevent a greater catastrophe in the future. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.